Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to go over this with y'all. What we're talking about today is staying human in the AI age. So what I wanted to share with y'all today is, I feel like it's gone from like not many people were using ChatGPT to it's AI everything all the time, all over the place, right? Like I expect for my Aura app to have AI, and I mean it's everywhere. But a big part of it has been, or a big part of the kind of the journey for me has been not only just using AI in an ethical way and from the standpoint of making sure that it's a tool, it is not a replacement for us, particularly when we're talking about how to use this in branding and marketing, because part of our unique voice and part of our brand is our unique take on things, right? Like how we explain things, the words that we use, all of that kind of stuff. But AI can help us definitely scale and help us be a lot more efficient. So it's finding that right balance and having the discernment to know, what can AI help me with without losing, my voice in it. All of these different LLMs, large language models, you've got ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, I know I'm forgetting one, Claude, a lot of these things where you can just say, hey, create me, respond to this email, or hey, create me a video script. Perplexity, thank you. Yes, Perplexity is amazing for research. So, we have all these things, but how do we know that we're using it to its max? And how do we know that we're finding that right balance between AI and scale, but then also remembering, ourselves? I wanted to start, from this perspective of, AI is there to help. It is not there to replace. And there's kind of a different conversation. We have, some QA time at the end, from the standpoint as far as what will AI be replacing. But for right now, when we're talking about specifically from using an LLM to help, scale your marketing, things like that, we want to make sure that we're maintaining our personality for that personal brand aspect. Great. Sounds awesome in theory. How do we actually do it? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I would love, I know, some of y'all had put in the chat which one you're using primarily. So if you have kind of your favorite, your go-to, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, whatever the case may be, highly recommend, to open up a window, follow along so you can try some of these out. And be able to, start to customize this. So you're not just kind of using that out of the box, AI. And the reason why is as we see it, being used more and more and more, and a lot of us have that, kind of have that high pattern recognition, that our job trains us for, or also that we're just naturally good at. And I don't know about you, but I start to see a lot of the same patterns, right? So you'll see, post captions written the same way, or you'll see, blog posts written the same way. And it's kind of like, yes, love the concept, but the fact is it's like if it doesn't feel like it's being written by a person, if it doesn't have that human touch, it tends to fall a little flat. And we want to make sure that whatever we're putting out there is really there to help us connect, to help express ourselves so we can attract our ideal clients and all of those kind of things, and not just have content that's out there that's like, okay, well, I posted. Yeah, you literally sound like everybody else. So it's very difficult to differentiate yourself and have your personal brand stand out when it sounds like everybody else. And same thing, if you want to put in the chat, if you've seen any patterns, I always think that that's great, because kind of like I see what I see, other people see different things. But some of those examples can be things like, you'll see everything where it goes tons of emojis. Yep, that is it. That is one. And listen, I love my emojis. Please do not take my emojis away from me. But when you have one where it's like, and this is going to be a total game changer, and then you see a rocket, it's like, okay. Another pattern is where you'll see it's not this, it's that. It's not a mortgage. It's your gateway to, future equity. So M dash, yes. And that's the thing, is that some of these things, some of these, word choices, some of these kind of copywriting patterns, some of these punctuation, they're legit punctuation, right? They're legit grammar, they're legit copywriting strategies, but when they get overused, because these LLMs were trained on massive amounts of written content on books and all of those kind of things, sometimes an M dash, and if you don't know, an M dash is basically where you have a sentence. It's kind of like what I'm doing now. You have a sentence, you sort of have a pause where you inject something, and then you're going back to the rest of your sentence. But if you have an M dash in a sentence, that can make sense because it reflects a natural pause. But when it gets overused, then it's like, that kind of feels like a tell. We'll also see sometimes a word that really kind of becomes overused. Well, the one that I'm seeing right now is quiet. Everything is quiet. Quiet courage, quiet strength, quiet marketing, quiet commitment, everything. We need other adjectives than just a limited number of 5. That's the reason to just kind of be aware of it. I'm not saying don't use AI, and I'm not saying overthink it, but just more from the standpoint of how do we make sure that the effort that we're putting in pays off from the standpoint of what that end product looks like. It can be very tempting to just like, okay, write me a caption about closing my first loan. You might be able to tell the story accurately, but if you don't have some of that personal factor, it's very difficult for people to connect to it. And I think that there's that also kind of that balance of like, oh, well, I don't want to fail publicly, or I don't want to be imperfect publicly, or I don't want to, say something and go like, well, why do they say it that way? The trade-off there is, if you want to have a personal brand, if you want to use, social, if you want to leverage having a personal brand, you're going to have to do some things different than everybody else is doing, because if not, then you're just blending into the crowd. There's kind of that push-pull dynamic there of, if you want to stand out, you have to be willing to, do things a little bit differently, and remember that, you have your own unique take on things. What we're gonna hopefully get to by the end of this is this is an example of kind of the Write Like Rebecca GBT that I put together. And this was the training that I put my chat GBT through to say, this is how I explain things. These are the words that I use. These are the phrases, I do use M dashes, or I have the, side quest, side thought that might, have a couple ellipses, like it's like ... But anyway, and then I bring it back to what I'm talking about, but really trying to make sure that what I'm putting out, when I do have something, that it can do a lot of the heavy lifting for me, because I might have just finished looking at some tax returns, right? And I'm kind of like all in my left brain space, but I want to pivot and be able to, be creative. I need a process to be able to really kind of verbally dump, all of that info, while also still being able to organize it. And then I can put that final edit on it so it sounds like me. So as an example, this is something that I used my Write Like Rebecca to write. It's not going to have all the emojis. It's not going to have, endless M dashes or a series of it's not this, it's that. So hopefully y'all can kind of see what our end target is here. Again, just to explain, so when you're looking at your own output, from your Gemini or your chat GBT, you can kind of say like, okay, like this feels a little bit more generic versus, all right, this is something that once I train my AI, yes, it sounds like me, and I can either use this out, right from the jump, or might want to put a couple, edits to it to kind of give it that final, imperfect personal, polish. But this is one example. As you can kind of see on the left, it's accurate, right? Like, it's an accurate statement, but it doesn't necessarily have any kind of emotion to it or any type of humanity to it. Shorter isn't necessarily better, and longer isn't necessarily better, but it's what do you need to tell the story and to get the point across that you're trying to tell, right? In this one, what I was doing from the standpoint of I wanted to essentially convey what the difference was, from the standpoint of like, hey, any market could be the right market for the right buyer. But from the standpoint of if you're really trying to hold out for lower rates, you might miss your chance because of what the dynamic is with lower rates, more competition, prices increasing, et cetera, et cetera. As another example, if anybody loves Ferris Bueller the way that I do, I was trying to go for the, the teacher on the left, right? Like he's talking about, I think it was voodoo economics and stagflation and all that kind of stuff. And his information was correct, but it was really boring, right? Yes, we want to be accurate, but again, what can we do to use the language, to use the phrases that we use from the standpoint of, the first sentence for the trained AI, some pre-approvals, I should say aren't worth, see, I have a typo, I'm imperfect, but some pre-approvals aren't worth the paper that they're printed on, and using that phrase because that's sometimes what the phrase that realtors are going to use. So I want to, if I'm thinking about who I'm trying to talk to, I want it to use their type of phrasing, not, industry lingo, not being, overly complex or technical or a whole bunch of acronyms or things like that. It's how do I meet them where they're at? Last example, again, just from the standpoint of kind of saying, if I want to talk about seller concessions, yes, I can give just the facts, right? conventional has multiple seller concessions based off the down payment. Like all of that is correct. It is also a complete snooze fest because although mortgages are very exciting to us, for most people, they're boring and they're scary. So being able to convey information by telling a story is going to help that concept stick a lot more, and being able to train your AI in how you talk, but also in some of your stories and some of your kind of perspective and take on things are going to help you get from the, kind of straight out of the box chat GPT with the rocket emoji to something that sounds like you, that, you're able to, again, kind of do that info dump or do that brain dump on what you want to write about, get you a lot of the way there, and then you can make some tweaks to make sure that it sounds like you. When we're getting into that, the first step, and this is where, since we're on a meeting, might not be able to grab one of these in the moment. If you do, and you have a YouTube script or something like that, if not, I do recommend, probably this process start to finish will probably only take you 30 minutes. So, carve out some time one morning, do it on the weekend, but go through this and take the time to do this because it will save you so much more time and you're going to have a better output. But one of the first important things when you are training an AI to sound like you and to keep the human factor in there is capturing your voice. Okay, so how do you do that? It's really good to start with a couple different examples. And those examples can be everything from if you have a YouTube video, whether you have one on your own channel, if you've been interviewed before or anything like that, you can go in the information section, like where it says more, and you do the drop down on YouTube, it'll say transcript. You can copy that entire transcript, put that into your AI and say, this is a transcript from a video, where I'm talking about whatever. I would like for you to analyze my voice. So your goal here is to get a couple examples. So it might be a YouTube transcript. It might be maybe you had an email that you wrote to a client explaining their situation. You could grab something like that. You could get Facebook posts that you specifically write or that you specifically wrote, right? It's not going to be something that the AI did, but where was there something that you were telling a story? Can you grab, if you're a voice memo person for texts, I call them pequeño podcasts, right? Because I love when my friends send them to me and I send them to them and we're talking back and forth. You can click on those voice memos. You can copy the transcript. Yes, it's going to very much feel like stream of consciousness and kind of a big old run-on sentence or paragraph. But again, it's going to capture your most essential voice of how you express yourself. Like I said, I would try to get a couple different versions, not just one. And if you're like, I don't have any of that, right? Like I don't write a ton on Facebook. My emails are pretty dry because it's just the facts and we're just kind of getting down to what, they're talking about. The other thing that you can do is when you open up your AI, there's going to be a microphone that you can, voice to text, or it even just has a voice audio option. But try to do that voice to text and say, okay, let's say that I'm sitting down in front of my client and I am talking to them about the difference between pre-approval and pre-qualification. Let me explain that. Let me just explain it like I would explain it. You're not trying to do it perfectly. You're not trying to, structure it like you're going to write it and get graded on it. You're just trying to explain it the way that you're going to say it naturally. And do that with a couple different topics and kind of get that data put into that chat of this is how I naturally talk about stuff. Second is to then, after you have given some of those examples, is you're going to prompt, that chat of, hey, I've given you these examples. I want you to analyze my writing style or my speaking style. And if you want a screen grab or if you want to type this in your own chat just so you can capture it, but it's a pretty basic prompt because what you're trying to do is give as much leeway to the AI to go through and analyze your transcript, your voice sample, whatever the case may be. But you're trying to kind of tease out what are some of those patterns. It might be your word choice. Do you have really dry and witty humor? Do you like to lead with the story and then give the facts? Do you like to, kind of do a bluff style, bottom line up front? I'm gonna tell you what it is. I think your best option here is to go conventional over FHA, and then I'm gonna explain why. Whatever that case may be, is just to figure out what are your unique patterns, because we all have them, even if we don't think about it specifically. We all kind of have our own specific ways of explaining things and talking, and that's what we're trying to do, is you're trying to capture that in as natural of an environment as possible. And then the third step is then you're building a style guide. So that's where the next prompt is you're saying, okay, great. Now using that, analysis, I want you to create, essentially, it's called reverse prompting almost, is, this is, I'm going to tell you what I want, right? I'm going to tell you, Gemini, what I want, which is a voice and style guide. You look at this analysis that you just did, and now I want you to write that guide out for me that says, okay, these are the specific things, sentence structure, topics, phrases. If there's something that you very clearly want to avoid, that is also something that can be put into this. I don't want any M dashes. I don't want any copywriting patterns of it's not this, it's that. I don't want, I don't want choppy sentences where, and y'all probably know what I'm talking about from the standpoint of, you'll see posts a lot of times on Facebook or LinkedIn where it's like short sentence, short sentence, short sentence, honestly, question mark, right? So if you're seeing some of those patterns, you can go and you can update your voice and style guide and say, hey, whatever this is that's going on here, I don't want this pattern in my writing style guide. Again, because if that's not the way that you normally talk, you don't have to force yourself into that AI box that's going to come out as a default. Once you have that, the benefit of doing that style guide is then that knowledge, that analysis, all of that kind of framework that you have in that chat doesn't just have to stay with that one chat. You can use that then from the standpoint of, testing it on different types of subjects. So that might look like, instead of giving a kind of a generic prompt, write me a video script about the upcoming Fed meeting. It might be, I want you to write a video script for Instagram Reel. I want it to be under 30 seconds. I want it to be, based off of this article that's talking about the Fed meeting that's coming up. And I want you to use my style guide to, again, direct how that output is going to look. So there's a little bit of testing back and forth of, okay, does this output sound like me? And if it doesn't, then the next step that you can do when you're refining is essentially say, okay, I like the first 3 sentences. And again, what I have found, some of the easiest way, the fastest way to get the results that I want is, instead of trying to type something out, whether I'm on my computer or whether I'm on my phone, is to use that microphone option within that LLM or within that chat, to just say, I'll turn on the speaker and I'm reviewing something and I'm go, okay, I do this a lot with my slide decks, right? Like how I build out these presentations. I'll say, okay, well, slides 3, I like that. Slide 4, I wouldn't use this word. I want something different, or I want it to say this. And you can just kind of give that feedback to then get a more refined output that does sound like you, or does sound like what you're going for. And once you do that and do that a little back and forth, you don't have to do this endlessly, but just do that a couple times. You can say, okay, analyze this final result and compare that to the style guide that I provided. What needs to change? And that's how you can continue to revise that. But once you have that style guide set, you can upload that as a document into any chat. Maybe you generated it in ChatGPT, but now you want to use Gemini, or you're going to, use Grok or something like that. You can say whatever the purpose that you're using, or whatever the question is that you're asking that AI for, and say, make the output match, my voice, my according to this brand guide, or according to this style guide. But that's the benefit of really kind of going through and doing a style guide in that way, is you don't have to continually, it's a shortcut from the standpoint of, you're not constantly having to kind of fight with your AI to say it right. You can prompt it on the front end and kind of, prime the pump, if you will, a little bit, to make sure that the output matches what you're looking for. And then step 5 is really just using that for future requests, from the standpoint of, you can carry it from platform to platform. You can use it wherever it is, because what you're going to do is save that as, as a Google Doc, as a PDF, whatever the case may be. So then you're able to just drop that in and use that as the framework again. So you're saving time, and you're not constantly having to either refine that output so it doesn't sound like it's written by AI, or the other option could be just, again, kind of putting up generic AI and it not really accomplishing the goal that you're looking for, which is ultimately, connection and personal expression. And then just, again, if y'all want sort of a screen grab real quick before we get to the Q&A section, from the standpoint that this is really, going through all of these steps, you can have a very good output in, probably 30 minutes, right? So just going through 1 to 5, gathering your samples, having to analyze your voice, building the style guide, testing that on a couple different type of, outputs based off of how you are using AI, see if it sounds like you, see if it matches. And then just being able to have that in your back pocket for, any type of future content that you're going to make. So you're not having to, constantly kind of start over, at square one.